everybody, and hello, Daniel Talks Puroresu. Basically, this video is directed towards Daniel Talks Puroresu. I said I was going to do a video abusing him, but I won't abuse him too much because he'd probably cry and piss his pants. But we had a disagreement on AMC and one's top 35 matches list. He said, in my honest opinion, Davey vs. Hull was actively bad, too much overkill, lack of sound dramatic development throughout the match, etc., etc., etc. While I agree those were issues in the match, I didn't agree those were big issues. And I responded with, I can't agree with that assessment. It wasn't the greatest match ever. Actually, I didn't agree with him about the too much overkill. But I felt it was the kind of match that Ring of Honor produces, therefore it should be given a special concession. As for the crowd reaction, and see, one of the problems is I see things differently to him. I do care how fans react because that tells me how over the match is getting. And then he responded again with, but the crowd cared isn't a persuasive argument towards me, especially not when the crowd is lukewarm. They spent more time chatting, I think you mean chanting shit towards to Tyler, than they did getting involved positively. But yeah, and the thing is, he's not really elitist because he says, this is how I know, because he says so himself, I'm normally the last guy to tap out from a silly finish spam fest, but I tapped out with like 10 minutes to go. I sat through it faithfully, but it hurt. Full stop. Bad. Full stop. The thing is, I think you don't really understand the Ring of Honor fans. And the thing is, I know you've criticised US or North American wrestling fans for making too much noise or you don't like the crowd, but chanting shit towards wrestlers isn't perceived as a bad thing or a bad reaction for a match. That's actually perceived as a good match. If you have fans that are abusing one wrestler and cheering another wrestler no matter what they do, that's actually good, especially if one is a face and one is a heel. This was a face versus face match, I guess, or a face versus tweener. But the thing is, in every match, it can't be like Japan where the fans will respect both wrestlers and cheer regardless of what happens, or they'll just cheer one wrestler less than the other. Fans do boo one wrestler and cheer another. Especially on the indie scene. It's not as prevalent in the WWE these days because the crowd is just different. In Ring of Honor, that does display a really over heel. And in every match, there has to be a heel and a face. Even if it's face versus face or heel versus heel, one person has to, and that's just North American wrestling. That is how matches work. One person has to be face, one person has to be. And going into the 5-star match ratings, I'm guessing you probably wouldn't understand a lot of Dave Meltzer, especially North American 5-star ratings. We know you don't understand. Oh, I know, not we. I don't know why I said we. But Samoa Joe versus Kenta Kobashi, I know you didn't understand why that was given 5 stars, and I'll explain that to you. I don't know if it's a 5-star match. I honestly haven't sat down and really thought about it, but I thought about why someone would give it 5 stars and why someone wouldn't. And I understand your position. The work rate isn't good enough, and that's what I find a lot of fans of ProWrest do. Their rating system is based almost entirely off of work rate. And when I'm watching ProWrest, Japanese professional wrestling, just so nobody gets confused, I do rate matches that same way. I do basically judge it more so on the work rate than I do other things. When I'm watching North American wrestling, it does change around. Work rate, ring psychology, basically just the in-ring stuff, the stuff that happens in the ring. That's what I judge it on. On the other hand, when I'm rating North American, whether it be wrestling, whether it be indie, WWE, Lucha, I do have to adopt different kind of rating systems because when I rate a match, I'm assuming that it is fans of that product who are watching, and so I can't go and rate. I can't rate Davey versus Tyler the same way, and the thing is, I don't enjoy them for the same reasons. I don't enjoy ProWrest from Japan the same way for the same reasons that I enjoy Ring of Honor. I don't enjoy Lucha for the same reasons I enjoy WWE, which I hardly do anymore, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So it really does come down to context. And one thing I just wanted to mention with the Joe versus Kobashi thing, while I explained to you previously that it did come down to how financially successful that show was in terms of DVD sales being phenomenal for them at the time or something, the crowd reaction being nuts, and we've just covered crowd reaction. But there was a lot of cultural significance amongst the internet wrestling fans in the US at the time. Joe was the most over guy in North America for the internet fans. He really was. There is nobody who touches him in how over he was now, except for maybe Bryan Danielson, but he's in a mainstream promotion now, so it's a bit hard to judge. But he was, at one time, Bryan Danielson was that over. But Joe was a fucking heavyweight, and heavyweights aren't supposed to get that over with the internet fans because they're big and slow and don't know how to wrestle, apparently. And Kobashi was the exact same for a Japanese wrestler amongst the internet fans, who were, by the way, Ring of Honor fans. Those are the two most over guys in the world for them in their respective places. So to see that match was a dream match, so it is culturally significant. Another match that's an example of this is Joe, AJ, and Christopher Daniels. That, from TNA, that is, at Unbreakable, I believe. That match represented what everyone thought was going to be a turning point for TNA, because up until that point, TNA had only been putting old, previously established main eventers into the main event scene. And then all of a sudden you put these guys who are really popular on the indie scene, who are really popular amongst the TNA loyals. That would be the biggest flaw with Dave Meltzer's 5-star rating system. That, fans who follow a different product or follow a different territory in wrestling won't understand why he's given certain matches 5 stars. Especially, the thing is, I've been watching wrestling for about 15 years now. And I know you had previously said that WWE was your North American promotion of preference. I can understand that, understanding where you started watching wrestling from, and that being, the worked shoot wrestling. I'm going mental. And then going into Japanese professional wrestling, and only now, seeing US wrestling. Because I have been watching wrestling for so long, I can't rate matches I don't treat WWE with any preference, because I've seen them do the same style of matches now for, while I understand it's good, they often have solid in-ring work, solid psychology, things that Ring of Honor and other indie promotions just don't have. Because I've been seeing them do it for 15 years, it has no impact on me. And it's the same thing with Ring of Honor. If they continue doing spot fests the way they do, it's not going to have any impact. But while it's still fresh, I give it, preferential star ratings. Because mine aren't I guess I would say my ratings aren't as serious as yours. And the thing is, everyone kind of thinks that Dave Meltzer is probably someone like you, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, that you sit there and go over the match and watch it. I'm not saying you watch it 2 or 3 times, but someone who mills over the match and really thinks about it for a long time. He might be now, but if you go back and read old Wrestling Observer newsletters, he'll often he'll talk about a 5-star match for the length of a YouTube comment. And he'll say, oh, I really like this match, had really good work rate, really spotty, crowd was into it. But it had good ring psychology, 5 stars. And you're just like, what? I thought it was supposed to be something special, but no, he quite casually would just throw a 5-star match out there. But yeah, that's probably one of the problems that I see with the 5-star rating system, and even with my own rating system, because I do it the same way as he does, is I always try to see things in context. I remember watching HBK versus Undertaker in the Hell in a Cell match, and I remember going nuts for it at the time, and seeing Kane pull the door off the cell and just marking out like a bitch. And then I became a bit more of an elitist a few years later when I got onto the internet, a few years, like nearly a decade later, and thinking, nah, that match isn't 5 stars. But now that I look back at it, and I heard Jim Cornette talk about it, I'm thinking, actually, I think that might be a 5-star match. You might not see it as a 5-star match, because you might not understand what the significance of that match was. And the thing is, you just said you don't care what the Ring of Honor fans think. Fair enough, that's your prerogative. But for me, that is incorporated into my star rating system. Not entirely, not like fucking it makes up half. Like if you take a 5-star match and then take out the audio from the crowd, and say, no, that's a crowd reaction, I'd go, oh, 2.5 stars. If the crowd was into it, I would have given it 5 or something like that. It's not. It doesn't make up half of the match. It makes up a percentage of the match, just because it tells me that the match itself was over, and that does come into the context of the match. That's how I know Joe versus Kabashi was an over match, and it does help my rating knowing that, you know, while I didn't see it as a perfect match, fans out there enjoyed it so much that they were screaming like bitches and smacking the guardrail and chanting all sorts of stuff. I hope you understand what I'm saying. The flaw of the Dave Meltzer and a lot of the other internet fans, especially fans who primarily watch indie wrestling or North American wrestling, is there's a context that you don't understand to the with these matches, which have been like, everyone gave Ric Flair versus Shawn Michaels in his retirement match. A lot of people gave it 5 stars. I gave it 4.5 stars. And my context for that was, this is the biggest name in wrestling going out, finally, retiring. In hindsight now, knowing the context that he was going to come back into TNA, I probably wouldn't give it the same rating. Even though it wasn't all that good in the ring, fans were giving it 5 stars and 4.5 stars. And yeah, it's the context. The thing is, if 10 years from now, a fan was watching my WrestleMania 24 review and saw my rating for Michaels versus Flair, and then went and watched it on YouTube or whatever, and went, wow, this match really isn't 4.5 stars. Was this what wrestling was like then? So they're always, the thing is, when you give a match a high rating, fans always watch it and they often don't understand the context. I think that's where your rating system is better, because it is more uniform through, it is based entirely on in-ring work. At the same time, when I go through your list and watch matches that are at the top, I go, while the psychology was sound and the in-ring work was snug and it all came together really good, sometimes it just doesn't entertain me, and that is a large aspect of it as well. Often it comes down to just how much matches do entertain me. Don't get me wrong, I do care about ring psychology and shit like that. What's another example I can use? I know of Kane versus Drew McIntyre from a few months back at some pay-per-view. I was sitting there bored shitless, complaining, saying, oh, it's so boring, fuck, it's shit. But the thing is, overall the match wasn't that bad. The psychology was okay, and the in-ring work was okay, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. But had that been a bit more exciting, had they done everything 10% faster maybe, and the crowd was 10% louder, I may have given it a whole star more. I guess what it comes down to is it's completely subjective. Subjectivity out of it all of the time. There is still a context that fans won't get unless you just disclude it like you do. But then there is a flaw in doing that with matches that are culturally significant, or amongst a certain fan base, like Joe vs. Kabashi, don't really get the props they deserve, because someone might look through the top 10 Ring of Honor matches of all time and then not see the truly important matches that happened in Ring of Honor. At least important for positive reasons. I'm not saying a match that's important for negative reasons, like, say, Sting versus Hogan from Starrcade should be given an extra 2 stars because it was culturally significant to WCW. No, it was negative, therefore you give it a lower rating. Like if Jeff Hardy's match at Wrestle Kingdom 5 actually somehow caused New Japan to drastically decline and go out of business, you'd probably give it a little bit less than 1 3/4 stars. I hope that helps you out. I'm probably not shedding any light on anything to you. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope there was something in there that explained why I disagree with you on certain matches and stuff.